I had time, and I had time to dig into it, and I was desperate for a store of value because 18 years I'd been in the game, and I knew that could all be gone in like 6 to 9 months. My goodness, we've had some ups. The ups last for like minutes, but we've had some crazy long downs, and the world seems to be against you all of the time. And it's the plebs, Bitcoin Twitter. A huge shout out to Bitcoin Twitter. All the worry, all of that nonsensical, pointless, overthinking, worrying about all the thing, because your kids are just going to turn out fine. They will turn out fine to be functional human beings. The more time you can spend with them personally is just going to fast track that.
This is Decentralized Radio. I'm Tristan.
And I'm Ryan.
The goal of this podcast is to help educate you on how to live your most optimal life. We will host industry expert guests to shed light on topics that matter.
We are not gurus, rather two individuals who have had to pave their own path to health and vitality, independent of the centralized systems that plague modern society. This podcast is brought to you by our lead sponsor, EMRtek. EMRtek manufactures high-quality, high-powered red light therapy devices. In my opinion, red and infrared light are two of the biggest nutrient deficiencies in our modern society due to our indoor lifestyles. Red light therapy devices, like the ones from EMRtek, can help combat that by providing high-powered red light while being indoors. I personally use mine every morning and every evening. Red and near infrared light is extremely beneficial for energy production in our body because it boosts mitochondrial function and penetrates deep into the cell. It is also extremely beneficial for skin health, eye health, as well as our circadian rhythms. And this is actually pretty much why I bought everyone in my family an EMRtek red light therapy device for Christmas. EMRtek panels are low flicker, low EMF, and use targeted wavelengths such as 830 and 630 nanometers, amongst others, to get extremely effective results. For more information, go to EMRtek.com and use our code DRadio10 for 10% off your order. That's EMRtek.com with our code DRadio, DRADIO 10 to save at checkout.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Decentralized Radio. Today, we have Daniel Prince on the line. Daniel, how's it going?
Going well. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, for sure. So Daniel is the host of the Once Bitten podcast and also the author of a book called Choose Life, which is all about kind of being a digital nomad as a family, which I think is pretty unique. And, it's become popular from, the young adult perspective, but raising a family and doing that, that's really cool. And I grew up traveling. I think it gave me quite a bit of unique perspective in how I was raised instead of just, being in one spot in the US, like most people here were raised. But yeah, I guess first let's maybe get into your own Bitcoin journey. How did the orange pilling come about for you, Daniel? And then maybe we can get into what motivated you really to start the podcast.
Orange pilled by, the usual story about what is it, like death by 1,000 paper cuts? It just kept coming back at me, and like, is this thing really not dead still? Like, how? And the reason I had heard of it is because I worked in financial markets. I worked on foreign exchange desks in London and then in Singapore for most of my career, and 15 years out there. And each time it kind of came to my attention, I was too wrapped up in hubris and ego of, brokering euro dollar and dollar yen trades in the tens to hundreds of millions. I didn't need to know about geeky internet money. I was fine, sat at my desk, rent seeking, and, benefiting directly from the spigot of the fresh money supply that was being printed by the central banks around the world into the global economy. Didn't have a clue how it all worked or why. It didn't matter. All I had to do was, match buyers and sellers. So when Bitcoin started coming across the radar, we would talk about it on the desk. Like, what is that? Like, really? Like, internet geek money is gonna, what? This has no value. This has no place at all. And it wasn't until I left that industry after reading The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, which is what prompted us to start traveling with the kids and look at life differently. It wasn't until I left and I had freedom, I had control over my time, and I had control over my, well, like ego just strips away when you're not surrounded by your peers, colleagues, and customers, like, 10, 11 hours a day and cocktail bars and dinners and whatever else, I had time, and I had time to dig into it, and I was desperate for a store of value because 18 years I'd been in the game, and I knew that could all be gone in like 6 to 9 months. The way things were moving back then, it's like, man, I was sitting at my desk throughout the 08 and 09 crisis. I saw so many people just get cut from their jobs. I was moved from one desk to a different desk against my wishes. I had no choice. Everybody took salary cuts, and the prices of everything else just kept on going up. And I needed a store of value. I had time, so I was researching a lot of things. I was listening a lot to Real Vision. They had just launched, Grant Williams and Raoul, and they were doing great work back then. Raoul went a little bit crypto crazy in the end, and that's a real shame. But in the beginning, in the early days, they were doing incredible work, and they brought on some people to talk about Bitcoin, and that blew me away. That was like, whoa, hang on. These guys, it was Wences Cesares, Trace Mayer, Tour de Meester, people of that ilk. What? Wow. What have I been missing? And that's when I really started reading into it and digging into it. Well, it wasn't much to read back in those days, 14, 15. Trying anything to get more knowledge about it and build up the conviction to actually start looking at it as an investment strategy. And yeah, it's been a long journey. It's been a fun journey. My goodness, we've had some ups. The ups last for like minutes, but we've had some crazy long downs, and the world seems to be against you all of the time. And it's the plebs, Bitcoin Twitter. A huge shout out to Bitcoin Twitter. Lump in my throat and thinking about it. Those times during 16, 17, and 18 where you just couldn't figure out what the hell was going on, especially during the block size wars. There were some voices there that were just rock solid the whole time. And proud to say, become in-person friends with a lot of those people now after meeting them at conferences around the world. And they did an incredible job of honing their tools and making the maxis, like bringing the maxi scene to life. And it's so important that we are all here now and pushing in the right direction and making sure that people coming behind us down the rabbit hole are only going to go for Bitcoin and none of the other stuff, none of the shiny things. So yeah, that's a quick nutshell story of how I found it and where my journey took me, ultimately to starting a podcast in 2020. That's the Once Bitten podcast, and yeah, that's been an incredible project itself. And I'm sure you get as much enjoyment out of running a podcast as I do.
Oh yeah, the podcasting is great, right? And especially when you get to connect with these, really just inspirational minds and perspectives, as you mentioned, that are doing such a great job of educating on Bitcoin Twitter or wherever nowadays. And I think your story in general, in how you first or simultaneously were also taking a big leap of faith by reading the 4-Hour Workweek and then deciding to go this more nomadic route. I think that's really important for people because I just see it with my dad all the time. You just get weighed down by the opinions of peers. Like you said, like the amount of times I've had my dad come home or talk to me and about Bitcoin as well. Actually, now the only reason he's like totally down to buy Bitcoin is because that guy at work told him, actually to buy Bitcoin. And I've been telling him for 5 years, but it's like, oh, well, this guy at work does that, or they think that. I'm like, this is just the average opinion. Like the collective opinion of your coworkers is kind of a good reflection of the collective opinion of a lot of members of society. And you're not really going to break free. You're not going to make these big strides unless you're able to leave that behind. But then you do have to, dissolve that ego and like just not care what anybody thinks about you and stay in that setting, or leave that setting completely, which is, it sounds like that's what you did. So yeah, maybe walk through that process a little bit. Was it just like the book by Tim Ferriss that really opened your mind? Because even, after, like you said, like more than a decade of working, that must have been a really hard decision to do so.
Yeah, exactly. I was coming up 20 years, and conventional wisdom will tell you, just stick around, just another 10, and you're going to be good. You're going to be golden. You'll get the golden handshake, and you'll get the parachute payment, and you have the money in the bank, and all is going to be good. And I just couldn't square that in my mind. And I found myself like every day staring out of the window, just daydreaming, or I'd be looking at real estate or like holiday destinations or something, anything to take my mind out of what I was supposed to be actually doing on the day-to-day grind. And if it, yeah, it's weird, right? Because if books can make such an incredible change to your life, or you read it and you're like, meh. And I wasn't one of these people that ever read those kind of books. Like, how do you characterize it? Is it self-help?
Self-help. Yeah, self-help, I
Yeah,
would say.
I guess so, or life coach book or something like
Mhm.
that. And I always just side-eyed them, this is nonsense, absolute crap. But a friend of mine, he's like, no, man, you got to read it. Just read it. I think it's going to like change the way you think about stuff. And I did. And he must have got me at the right time. Good job. Well done. And I was like, my God, there is a way. And you're right. The book is more aimed at like the 20 to 25-year-old
Mhm.
that doesn't have too much to risk in life and can put a backpack on and a laptop and a charger and go do some drop shipping BS on Amazon or something, So like, yeah, well, I think I can apply these rules and figure something out as a 37-year-old father of 4. So I was reading the passages of the book to my wife. I'm like, and this, and this, and this, and we could do this, and this just seems possible. And we knew we needed to change something because, like I said, things had changed. The industry I was working in had changed. The people had changed for the worse. Everything was just getting worse. Everything was getting more expensive where we were living in Singapore. Rent was going crazy. And you'd run as fast as you could just to stand still come the end of the month. So we knew something needed to change. Kids' education needed to change. We'd had to take them out of the all singing, all dancing, 30 grand a year, expensive international schooling because of, times were tougher. And they were in the state education school there. And we're like, man, this is like bad. So we needed to change. So everything just came to a head. But then you still have to do it, right? That's the hard part. You still have to rip off that Band-Aid because there is so much sunk cost fallacy at work there. Really, truly. And fear over kids' education being like one of the biggest sticking points because obviously you just want to do the best for your children. And again, conventional wisdom and the societal construct will tell you, get them in the best school that you can, make sure that they're doing their homework, make sure you get them there on time, make sure they're doing after school curricula, make sure they're doing their violin and all of that stuff that we see today, this helicopter parenting that's just got out of control. And we realized we're not in control of any of this. This is just like it's happening, but like it's just crazy. It's a whirlwind. Come the end of the week, it's a total whirlwind, and you just collapse into your specified dip in the sofa to watch some shit on TV, and dread the next morning. Like that, I didn't want that anymore, and so we went for it. A lot of sleepless nights, a lot of times, a lot of hurdles where we could have fallen, and fear, and trying to recognize those fears, which is again something in the book that Tim discusses, is the fear setting exercise. list your biggest fear and then go through the steps that you would put in order in which to rectify that problem. And you're like, okay, yeah, that wouldn't actually take more than 2 or 3 phone calls and would be fine. And we'd have shelter and would be around people we loved and would have 3 meals a day. So what are you actually afraid of? And then you realize, well, what you're afraid of is reputation. That is the killer. And again, it all comes back to ego. And I remember thinking about this the other day. It's like, well, as Bitcoiners.
Hey, friend, thanks for listening. If you really enjoy this podcast, it would be really appreciated if you left us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple, or subscribe to our content on YouTube. This helps us get to a larger reach and a larger audience to spread this wonderful free education.
We go through this mind shift. And I hadn't gone through that yet because obviously this was all happening before I actually truly started to understand Bitcoin. But Bitcoiners that have been in the rabbit hole any longer than 18 months, they know their brain starts getting rewired. And they know that there's going to be a point where they're not going to be able to just put up with the freaking bullshit that we are surrounded by and the conventional wisdoms, the non-player characters, whatever. Like it just becomes too much and you have to start speaking your truth. But a lot of people do hold back, and they hold back because they're protecting the reputation. They're still wearing that fiat mask, and that's what we need to kill all of that stuff. Why would we want to hang on to a reputation that's been built in a fiat existence? And any of us that have been born after 1971, that's a big kick in the balls, right? Everything we've ever known has been based on a lie, on manipulation, on coercion, because at the base of society, money, what we use to express value to each other and communication to each other, has been completely corrupted. So the absolute core of it all is corrupted. And everything we've ever built, our careers, our relationships, has been built on that. And that's why you find yourself at the age of 30 painted into a corner of some career you never even studied for in the first place, still crippled by student debt, having no fucking clue how you got there, most likely depressed or on some kind of medication. You're like, what? But still, you're afraid of breaking that mold because it's taken so long to get there. And what I love about Bitcoin is it's really empowering and enabling people to become truly who they're supposed to be. It's a long process, but it's happening.
If you're a health conscious food consumer who's also very active, you know how big of a struggle it is to find a bar that is both convenient and nutrient dense. That's why I was so excited when I discovered the Alpa Bar. The Alpa Bar is a meat-based bar that contains only simple ingredients, 100% grass-fed beef, tallow, and honey, and is both nutrient dense and convenient and packs a caloric punch of over 300 calories. For me, this was a game changer and is now the go-to snack and fuel source I use when I'm hiking, camping, hunting, skiing, or doing anything in the outdoors and I don't have the resources to cook a full meal. The Alpa Bar is made proudly in Colorado and only uses locally sourced meat. JJ and Rob are also extremely based and accept Bitcoin for payment. I highly recommend you check out the Alpa Bar for any time you need a nutrient-dense and convenient snack on the go. Check them out at eatalpa.com and use code DRadio5 at checkout to get a 5% discount. And if you pay in Bitcoin, you can get an additional discount on top of that. That's eataupa.com and use code DRadio5 at checkout. Yeah, it's like once you look through the world from this lens of decentralization or being a more sovereign individual, to me, there really is no going back. And this culminated for me in multiple aspects from a health perspective and then also from a Bitcoin perspective in the last, 5 years. And then simultaneously, I saw what my dad kind of went through, just worked really hard as an engineer his whole life, did everything he was supposed to do. And now he's, wants to retire and it's just not there for him. And he's been, fiat farmed in a classical example of, following the rules and not really getting out on top at the other end. So it really is tough. And I think for me, I got in a bad place from a health perspective. And then at that point, I was like, I just don't give a shit what anybody thinks. Like, I need to do this to get better. And yeah, it's the most important aspect is your mindset. Because yeah, if you're still holding on to what people think, or your ego in general, like you're saying, what if something goes wrong, and really there is a lot of wiggle room there. Like you're saying, you could make a few phone calls, you could do some research. I mean, say even if you tried it out for 6 months, like what you did, and then it's like, oh, okay, if this doesn't work out, I could always go back. This normal life is probably always going to be there sitting for me waiting if I really do want to go back. So what was kind of your, leap of faith and getting the family and where was your starting point there? Because that was probably the biggest thing. And once you do it once, you're probably, set then and convinced after you realize it's quite a better lifestyle, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, there were some hurdles in the way. Selling all of your stuff. I mean, whoa,
Mm.
that is just when you realize how much shit you've accumulated over the time, over the years, and just trying to get rid of it all and declutter. So that was one thing. Getting rid of all that stuff, getting rid of all that baggage. Also, like closing down accounts and all the administration and all that kind of stuff. That just takes a hell of a lot to manage. And um, those sticking points, quitting your job, right? Quitting your job, like having that conversation, that is so difficult.
That's tough. That's tough. And I've done that too, to just go to different jobs. And yeah, you don't realize how actually you feel like you're breaking up with someone like in a relationship. I mean, it's kind of what it is. And then, yeah, that fear of judgment is very strong.
It's huge. You've got to walk the walk, right? You've got to go into that office and you've got to have that conversation and sit down face to face with someone. And even if you might not particularly respect your boss, it doesn't really matter. You've still got to sit there and be prepared to say, I'm done, I'm walking, and this is the reason why, and we're going to go away and have this incredible adventure. And I remember the person I had to do that to, that was tough. I really respected him, and he'd done a lot for me. And I built a product for him, and it was just about to start going well. And bam, see you later. And it's not nice, it's not great. And I remember I'd quit my foreign exchange job just before that. So the last year I was working in commodities. I remember quitting my foreign exchange job, and that was a different story. Like they were immediately suspicious that you're going to a competitor, right? It wasn't kind of like, okay, let's have a balanced conversation about this. And I remember actually as well, one day, the guys from New York office were in, like, and they honestly thought they were like mafioso, these guys. They're in the office, and they would call in everybody in one by one, just a stupid kind of power show that they have. And so I go in there, and the guy that was running our country, our desk, said, well, Dan's going to be leaving us in about 6 weeks or so. And one of them was like, where the fuck you going? Where you going? What? I'm gone, man. I'm just leaving the biz. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not doing foreign exchange. I'm going. Like, he said, yeah, you better be fucking telling the truth. Otherwise your stock turns to fucking dust. I'm like, is this how we do it?
Wow.
Like, this is madness. But that's that kind of arena. And it's not just in that sector, right? It's across all sectors now. And yeah, you got to have that conversation. That's one thing that I think really stops people. The fear of having that difficult conversation. That's another thing Tim Ferriss said in his books. Nothing moves you further forward in life than having the difficult conversations.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting because now, even compared to, like, say, one generation earlier, people are switching jobs a lot more because I think they realize they have to, right? Like the fiat system is setting them up to fail if they just stay in one job. So the loyalty has completely gone down the drain, and that is where you get like reactions like that. I noticed that just, working corporate America as well. But if you're completely leaving, the industry, this is a whole different thing. So how did you go about doing this? Was it were you guys on the road, like traveling a bunch this first year? Was finding work like a challenge? Because this was pre-COVID, and certainly,
Yeah.
the remote jobs were lesser available, and then you have a whole family with you as well. And then I want to get into kind of the education piece, what you
Yeah,
uncovered. But
sure. So
first,
this was back in 2014. Kids were aged 8, 6, and 2 3-year-old twins. Um, we had a home which we'd purchased just after the birth of our first daughter, and that was based in Koh Samui in Thailand, because we were living in Singapore, so it was like an hour and a half
Mm,
flight. And Thai baht at the time was a very, very favorable exchange rate. So it's like, okay, well, that looks like a good opportunity. Let's buy that and invest, and that could be a holiday home, and we'll rent it out and whatever else. So that was still in our possession, and we're like, well, let's just go there first of all, take 2 months, max out our visa, tourist visa, and drop a knee and figure out the next step, because we're going to need a deep breath after this one. So that's what we did, and we got across there, and we just tried to figure out, okay, what we're going to do. Well, we want to travel. We know that. Okay, so what what are the options here? Because it's going to be really expensive to, like, hotels are clearly out. So maybe we could Airbnb it. Maybe we could do woofing, which is where you uh,
work on a farm. Yeah.
volunteer on organic farms and things like that. So countries lend themselves to that a lot, especially New Zealand.
Mm,
Well, that would be cool. Why don't we look into that? And I also found, just before we left, a home swapping site called Love Home Swap. It's now been merged and bought. It's now called homeexchange.com. And I reached out to the founder, and she got back to me. And I said, well, I just watched one of your news interview junket things. It seems like a really interesting uh, kind of way to travel. And she said, yeah, it's really taken off. And she had been inspired by watching the film The Holiday
mm,
on her way to a holiday, to stay in a hotel where she's sleeping, when the kids are sleeping. And it was just like a nightmare. So she went and started this business, and it took off. And we were like, wow, okay, so we can now leverage the home here. Not only can we have it in a rental pool, have it listed on Airbnb, but now I can leverage it here in a home swapping situation and see what happens. So listed. And within days, man, we were getting people like, oh, do you want to come here? Do you want to go there? I'm like, wow, right, there is something here. So we started plotting out, right, from here, where do we go? Let's go here, 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 and here. And then once we got the countries figured out where we wanted to go, I would start approaching people on the site, introducing ourselves, saying, this is what we're doing, this is what we're trying to achieve. Would you be interested in a swap? Or would you be interested in taking some points? They have like a point system
mm.
within the site as well. I suppose it's own shitcoin, but it works. But that's how we did it, mate. Within the first, after the first swap, I was like, whoa, that changes everything. Like, we're going to be able to go a lot longer than I thought. So over the span of the 2.5, almost 3 years that we were doing this solid travel, sometimes we'll be staying with friends or family, if we were in those countries. Sometimes we did find work on home exchange, woofing, and sometimes we would have to plug into Airbnb. Otherwise, I would say 90% of the travel was done via the sharing economy using the Love Home Swap website. And some places, man, were absolutely incredible. I'm talking beachfront, 6 bedrooms, floor to ceiling windows. like this is someone's house, and like they know our place is a lot smaller in Thailand, right? They didn't care. They just wanted to be in Thailand. So the location becomes way more important than the actual accommodation, right? And you know when you get there that you're going to be helped out by the neighbors or the friends that live close by. You get plugged straight into the community. And when we realized that this was going to just completely destroy what I thought was going to be our biggest expense, light bulbs went off all over the place. We're like, okay, where else can we like change our lives and think in complete opposite directions? And again, that would have led me to being more open to learning about Bitcoin as well when I did finally start getting it.
That's really cool. Was the average time of stay like just a couple months, pretty much?
We were bouncing, I guess on average, we were doing around 10 days and then
10
gone.
days. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Although Australia, we were there for 2 months, but a week to 10 days in one place, then another, then another, then another. New Zealand, the same. We were there in New Zealand just over 3.5 months, I think it was. But we did like North and South Island, home swap to home swap to home swap to home swap. It was incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not a fan of like the hotel. I always need an Airbnb. I need a home really because it just feels more comfortable. You have a place to cook. You don't have to go out to eat as much. So it's very much expense saving, but also just feels like a more normal experience. And you said you did that then for 2.5 years, pretty much, or
we were long-term traveling for 2.5 years. We still home swap to this day. I've just finalized one we're off to the UK next month. We have a month-long home swap with somebody. And we this year we went to some Bitcoin conferences. We home swapped in Prague. We home swapped in Amsterdam last year. We home swapped in the UK to get across to some meetups over there last year as well. We also home swapped this year when we were in Lugano. We home swapped in Italy, in Como. Again, like it was 45 minutes from the conference center, but we could get there and back, no problem. And we're based in Como, in Menaggio, in a home swap, 6-bedroom house overlooking like Lake Como. This is crazy.
Yeah, if you've never been to Lake Como, I can confirm that this is a very beautiful place.
Yeah. So that changed our way of traveling. Always. So we've completed easily over 100 swaps at this point.
What's the biggest challenge when you're constantly on the move like that for you and your family? Because for me, I love traveling. I've traveled a bunch as well, but there is a certain point where it's like, I wish I could stay in this one place for maybe like a solid 60 days or something like that. What's the biggest challenge for you guys as a family?
Just packing and unpacking, man. That was like a solid pain in the ass because there were 6 of us, and like I said, the kids were all under 8, so they're not folding shit and packing their own bags, and a lot of it obviously fell on my wife because she wanted it done properly. Even I wouldn't be deemed as trustworthy to pack well and efficiently. So that got really, really draining. So
how much did you have with you, I guess, is the next question.
Far too much. Far too much. Made the classic mistake. And, just literally go in what you're wearing and figure it out on the way. That's the way you should do it. But, we had far too much. Yeah.
And then in terms of, the world schooling, the educational perspective, obviously you had a couple younger ones, but then, a couple older ones as well. So how did you go about that? Was that kind of like something you and your wife mapped out before you left or figured out on the way? I mean, obviously they're getting a very diverse cultural experience, which is education, of course, as well. So curious on that front.
Yeah. Always questioning if you're doing the right thing. Of course, that's what parents do. Even if you've put them into your local school, you're always going to question whether that was the right thing or whether the school in the next town is better. And, you're always going to do that. But because, we were doing this weird esoteric thing, traveling with the kids, and like nobody understood it. Nobody can understand why did you quit your job? Why are you taking your kids out of school? Why are you traveling the world? what is home swapping? Why are you staying in other people's houses? Like, everything was just fucking weird to most people. And that weighs on you because you're constantly being judged. You're being judged on your original decisions rather than the results. And the results were outstanding. Like, the kids were just so adaptable. They're so approachable now. I take them to conferences around the world. People like meet them that, with it, they're friends within instant of like meeting a 32-year-old like Bitcoiner. I'm like, I've just been talking to your daughter for like 2 hours. She's 16. Like, yeah. That blows my mind. So
Incredible.
But it happens with Lauren and Samuel as well, and they're only 12. So the challenge for us was getting over ourselves and deschooling ourselves. And this is the biggest problem for new homeschooling parents or people that are, thinking about doing it. The one thing I would say is you've got to deprogram. You have to. Because if you go into it with the idea that, right, okay, we'll have them doing math drills between 9 and 10, and then we'll do a bit of science between 10 and 11, then we'll have a little snack, and then maybe we'll do some artwork, and then in the afternoon, it doesn't work. You can't plan those schedules that way. That's what state schooling does. That's unnatural. You shouldn't be planning learning. Learning isn't systematic. And that's one thing you realize, and you can't tell people until you do it, right? So that's why a lot of people end up like developing an unschooling approach or self-directed education approach because the curriculums at home, people, you buy packets of curriculums off the internet and then they send them out to you, and you're supposed to make the kids sit down there and do it and write their names at the top and in a manila envelope and send them back so they're marked. And you're like, no, you're not breaking free that way. You're still being controlled. But if you want freedom, you've got to forget curriculum, and you really have to forget your own schooling, your own programming. And it is a psychological trauma that was it's still a psyop to this day, but we've all been psyoped by state education, and you've got to break it, because otherwise you're going to end up passing it down onto your kids. So we work really hard at that, but it's so difficult. So difficult. Unless you can surround yourself with a like-minded community, so definitely get out there and meet people and find it. You're going to be your normal friends that still got their kids in normal schools and whatever else. If that's still your control friend group, you're still going to feel a little bit ostracized. There are books out there that are going to help. John Holt is one of the most renowned in the space with his books. Peter Gray, Free to Learn, is another one that people read a lot. So I would certainly point people to those resources. But yeah.
Yeah,
man.
It's this. Well, for me, it's kind of fun because I know there's a 0% chance that my kids will be in like a public school when I have them, whenever that is. But yeah, I can't even imagine, because it's really this de-social programming you have to do for yourself and then your children as well. And I can imagine that's such a challenge. And there's just so many. It's like, yeah, the curriculum aspect, because we all just grew up. It's like, all right, you need to do X amount of time of math, of science, of reading, of blah, blah, blah. How have you fine-tuned that over the years? And I guess, yeah, what are some points that maybe of advice you could give to people? Because like in general, I know folks who homeschool, a lot of times, if children are under like 7, 8 years old, they're like, we really focus on just like, energetic, hands-on education, but there's not really a lot of concrete stuff because they're children. They should be playing most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious on your opinion.
Yeah. I mean, what a concept, right? Let a kid be a kid. I mean, why have we got them locked up in classrooms? And I don't know what age they go to in the States. Well, yeah, you tell me. What would be like
if 6,
6, right?
5, 6. Yep.
What about those high flyers that are living in the cities and they're both working? What are they
Oh
doing
yeah,
with their kids?
daycare. I mean, there's like advanced daycare for whatever 2, 3, 4 year olds as well. So it's very early.
This is just so wrong. And like Dr. Gabor Mate talks about this in his book, Hold On to Your Kids. And if anybody wants to go back and listen on the Once Bitten podcast, I did an interview with Seb Bunny, who, like you, doesn't have kids yet. But he read this book and it all clicked into place. Like his childhood was just unraveling in front of his eyes. And he wrote an article about the book, which I saw and I loved. And we met each other in Prague. And he was doing a talk and I was doing a talk, and we finally got to meet and have a chat. And we said, right, let's rip on this book on the pod. And we did. And we talk about the psychological trauma that happens with kids. It's just pure abandonment. It's abandonment that we suffered from. In the case in the UK when I was growing up, I think it was 5 years of age. But then but before that, parents get psyoped into giving their kids up to get them ready. Let's call it kindergarten or something like that. And then all of a sudden, so you're a kid, right? You're 2. Let's say you're 2, 3, whatever. It doesn't matter. And then one day, because you don't know what's going on, one day the person that is by your side and has loved and nurtured you for every minute of every single day takes you to a random place full of random people with a fence around it, and then pushes you through the gate and says, like, see you later, honey. No amount of like pre-warning, like, oh, on Monday we're going to go do this. They're just words to a kid of that age until it actually happens. And then mothers get, and I used to see this at school gates. Mothers stand there and watch their kids screaming and crying, being dragged away. And the teacher that's trained to do this, that, oh, it'll be okay. You just walk away. It'll be okay. We've got them now. They have to cry it out. And then it'll be fine after 10 or 15 minutes. What the fuck are we doing? Right? This is
so bad.
This is child abuse, man. And like the abuse is so, it's so deep. Because like I said, that person, that adult that is trying to smooth that situation over has been trained to believe that they're doing something good for the child. This is how far and how deep and how sick this whole thing is. And that is state education. And you carry that abandonment with you. We still do as adults, mate. We still do. And we'll look back. They will look back at us hundreds of years from now, and they'll look at this little experiment that's been going on for about 150 years of state education. They're like, what the fuck were those guys thinking? Like, really?
It's so bad. And it's all, to me, it's, accelerated even more so, right? Because we have this collapsing fiat monetary system. Now both, members of the household have to work. I was very fortunate again, and it's like maybe that is slightly a repercussion of why my dad doesn't have, the retirement he wants to, but my mom was able to stay home with us when we were younger until we were 5 or 6, and that's like tremendous. I'm so thankful and grateful for that, and also the experiences we had in general. But right, like the education system was set up for like industrial workers, and now it's just turned into basically just glorified daycare because both the husband, wife, or whatever the situation is, everyone has to work because the money's broken. So again, it's a really sad situation for most people, and another one that Bitcoin fixes. So what have been some things that you've really like focused on, educating your children on, and have they been, really open to it? Because I'm always just curious, right? In general, like you try and can always teach, kids things, but a lot of times I just remember being in school, right? Like you're just memorizing things, you're learning things because you have to. But if you're actually interested in a topic, you're going to want to learn more about it. And that's something I think in this homeschooling setting is a bit more, that barrier is pretty easy to overcome because you have this control, this ability to get them excited about it. So how have you kind of bake that in.
That's what you learn, man. It's what's exciting them, and it could be fleeting, right? Classic example is she's 16 now, but at 14, my daughter was like, "Yeah, I want to learn guitar." Like, right, okay, fine. Like the general knee-jerk reaction would be, if you're two working parents and blah blah blah. Well, what do? Well, you go out and you buy the best guitar you can find, and then you buy the best teacher you can find, and then you make sure that they're there and do the lessons and blah blah blah. I was like, well, okay, fine. Let's look on eBay. We'll find a cheap guitar, and there you go. Learn off YouTube. And then a few weeks later, he's like, yeah, I think I want some lessons. All right, okay, fine. Let's get you some lessons. And then the guy would come and they'd do some lessons. 6 months later, she hasn't picked up the guitar again. So I put the tools in her hand. That's all I could do, right? I didn't, most people, most like when you're stuck in that fiat hamster wheel, you're pushing, and you turn them off just by virtue of doing that. But then it becomes like this force function. You'll just keep making sure, because again, sunk cost fallacy. I spend so much money on a guitar. You've got to now at least practice 9 hours a day and all this kind of stuff, right? It doesn't work. So, but again, it is so difficult because if you haven't deschooled yourself and not understanding the difference between what you pointed out, teaching and learning. This is what John Holt said when he was a teacher, and he's like, why is it I teach and yet they don't learn? And he come to like the big penny drop moment. It's like, right, there's a huge difference here. They're here out of, they're not here, voluntarily, that they're here compulsorily. And the learning's not going to happen in this setting, in this situation. So we have different tools. We use online tools such as OutSchool or Kubrio, where the kids can log in and pick the clubs that they want to join, and they just join by Zoom call. And so the week gets kind of made up of different sessions doing that. And then obviously we have in-person things. Lauren, who I just waved at a second ago, she's just gone out to her drama class on a Friday night, and they're doing Christmas cookies and doing a little sing-song show or theatrical production tonight. And I've got to take my son to his football training, so he's doing that 3 times a week.
Well, that's kind of what I wanted to get into is, so these websites are like just local events or, meetups, because the biggest criticism, right, of homeschooling is the classic, your kids are going to be socially awkward, socially unaware. And especially for you traveled around a lot, so they're constantly, moving. How have you addressed, that social aspect and the community and building friends with them?
Yeah. Socially awkward. I love it. Because whenever I meet state-schooled kids, it's like you get about 4 words out of them. Okay. And I ask them weird questions because, why not? I try and get something. I just can't. They're used to like, oh, hello. How are you? Fine. What'd you do at school today? What do you want to be when you grow up? I don't know. Like that's the level of conversation. Even with your aunties and uncles, right? That if you remember growing up, that would be it. And then all you're doing is trying to get out of the room because it's awkward and stuff. Homeschool kids, they come up, introduce themselves, look you in the eye, and like I said, 2 hours later, you're still chatting with them. And that comes from being around adults a lot longer. Because in a school setting, you're just around kids your exact same age, which is completely nuts as well, if you think about it. And the only adult in the room is the authoritar that, is just there to mouth flap and not connect with you in any way, and just force feed the curriculum down your neck. So the social activities, they come thick and fast. They have their friends. They get invited out to places. Lauren's got a sleepover this weekend, ice skating tomorrow. We've got another World School family who are arriving this evening, 7 p.m. in their camper. They're going to park up on our driveway. We're going to have dinner with them, and they're going to spend the weekend here and then drive off up into Germany on their way back home to Prague. This is just how it kind of all happens.
That's so incredible. And I'd imagine, like you said, I think, well, it's important what you said about the age thing, because I think people, especially you have 4 children, I think people realize as well. And the benefit of having, a span of children is I'd imagine the older ones start to, take the younger ones under their wing and maybe educate them. They almost become like a little self-sovereign group, right?
Mhm. Yep.
That's incredible. The last question on the schooling is just, how does it end, right? Do you send them to university? Do you send them, how do you let them spread their wings to
Yeah.
adulthood? Because I thought about this as well, and it's impossible for me to say right now because again, this might be 30 years in the future for me. But yeah, obviously we know the issues with centralized academia, but there's still, yeah, a lot of trade-offs to be had. So what are your thoughts
Mhm.
there for
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
the
And
eldest
yeah, and
children?
to be clear, I want to make sure that everybody listening understands that there is a choice of both of these things, right? So, for example, my oldest daughter, after we did the 3 years of traveling around and doing the homeschooling, unschooling thing, world schooling, she was like, "Yeah, I want to try it. Let's." We actually, when we came to France, we were traveling for 3 years. We came to France, and we were house sitting long term, and we said, right, guys, we're going to put you into school here so you can learn another language immersively, and then we'll take you out and carry on traveling, whatever. My oldest daughter, she really enjoyed it, and she wanted to go at it. She's like, she picked up French very, very quickly. So we're like, right, okay. So she actually went through more of a conventional route. The other three are completely out, but everybody's speaking French, so that's great. The So where she's at now is she's 18. She's gone on her own travels with a couple of her friends. She's currently in Thailand, and she's going to go to Cambodia and Philippines, and they're making up wherever the cheap flights or buses are. Right, that's going to be the route. So go, yeah, have an adventure. Don't be afraid. Get out there. Go see the world. It's so much easier to stay in touch nowadays, anyway. Right? She's on the WhatsApp every day. And she hopes to be able to go and study international relations at a UK university in September. And I'm like, well, do you really want to do that? Have you considered like that's 3 or 4 years? You got to understand opportunity costs. You've got to understand what they're going to be teaching you. Listen to this interview with Alex Gladstein. Read this interesting article about the IMF and the World Bank by Alex Gladstein. You know, if you want to do, if you want to do international relations, think about, you know, Bitcoin and international relations and uh, the human aspect of human rights and what's going on around the world and how these policy decisions they get made in a closed room and that just gets pushed down and like the ripple effects are just like so disgusting and what are we actually doing to solve this because it's not going to be solved at the policy making level. That just makes things worse. Always has done, always will. Centralized power doesn't work, as we know. And so we had a discussion the other day, and fingers crossed, it looks as though she might be able to do some kind of internship before she gets off to university with the Human Rights Foundation. And I think that would be an incredible, eye-opening experience, and then give her, a truly unique perspective of. I'm still convinced she'll go and start studying the course, but I just hope that she'll be brave enough to see through the bullshit, call out the bullshit, give opposing opinions, write opposing dissertations, and then just pull the plug if it's all just complete nonsense, because that's what I hope to have armed her with. Uh, Remains to be seen. Now, our 16-year-old who has predominantly been homeschooled is currently thinking about, yeah, maybe I could plug into an A-level course or something, and she's been doing those online. She'd rather do that more in person. So we're looking for different options there. Is there a blended way that we could get her learning with a bunch of kids in some kind of institution if need be or outside? So we're kind of in that period at the moment with her. And the 12 and 13-year-olds, they're okay. They're flying along with their online stuff and their in-person social activities. So it's constantly moving. And this is another thing that puts people off, because you are responsible, right? You are on the hook. It's funny that a lot of people think, you homeschoolers, you're irresponsible parents. You're not giving your kids the best shot at life. Like, irresponsible? Like, what are you talking about? It's on me, man. Everything. Like, this is pure responsibility now. It's 100% responsibility. And you're constantly thinking about it, and you're constantly looking at different ways of getting them connected and into some kind of, shout out to Andy. We found a guy in Dorset in the UK, Bitcoiner math teacher that left the education system and went freelance. So we
Amazing.
paying him via the Lightning Network to do one-on-one math sessions with my kids, and they love it. They're like, "Oh, when's Andy? Can we do him twice a week?" I'm like, "You guys are gonna you're attacking my stack right now. Like, calm down with the math love."
This episode is brought to you by Wyoming Based, my new apparel company that is focused on providing high-quality, natural fiber-based products using 100% U.S. supply chains. Our first two products, the 100% wool everyday beanie and 100% wool rib sweater, are proudly made right here in Wyoming using local wool. The wool is low itch, high quality, and durable, naturally antimicrobial, and way better for your health and the health of the planet. If you want to support a local U.S. brand and are tired of supporting woke outdoors companies that shill plastics, check us out at wyomingbase.com and pre-order your sweater and beanie today. Yeah, I think it's proof of work, right? Like, it's all on your shoulders. Then you're taking that individual responsibility, but you kind of eventually I think you just have to let them go and pursue what they want. And it's like everything that you taught them, you'd hope they'd be able to apply that to the real world. And I think it's important to kind of not try and just tell them exactly what to do. Like, everything you've been working towards is so they can make the right decisions on their own. But man, I can imagine that would be, a tough situation. So,
and that's the toughest thing for a parent. And I remember talking to another homeschool mom. Her kids, they'd pretty much flown the nest, like 22, 20, and 18 or something like that. And they'd done the whole world schooling thing as well. They actually, I remember when we were doing our research into it, it was her daughter, who was age 13 at the time, wrote a blog post on their family blog. And it blew me away. I was like, wow, she can write, this kid. This is unbelievable. And it was really witty. And I was like, wow, I want that for my kids. And I remember interviewing her many years later, the mother and then separately the daughter. But I was talking to the mother, and I'm like, right, if you think back 6 to 8 years, what's one thing you'd have changed? And she's like, easy. Like, all the worry, all of that nonsensical, pointless, overthinking, worrying about all the things, because your kids are just going to turn out fine. They are. And that doesn't matter. Whether they're world schooling, unschooling, homeschooling, state education, public education, private education, boarding school, whatever, they will turn out fine to be functional human beings. The more time you can spend with them personally is just going to fast track that and give it, a huge boost. And again, I would push people to go and read "Hold On to Your Kids" by Gabor Mate, because he, clinical psychologist, he just like lays that all out. So yeah, that's one thing we still suffer from, though. We still, constantly worrying. We doing the right thing? Are we not doing the right thing? Like,
it's impossible. It's impossible not to. I mean, it's good. It shows you care, but I think that is a powerful message. And I think this would be really helpful, because it is something that is intimidating, homeschooling in general. And then the world schooling piece is really cool. So I appreciate you sharing all this. And if folks want to check out your book, it's called Choose Life: The Tools, Tricks, and Hacks of Long-Term Family Travelers, World Schoolers, and Digital Nomads. So that's on Amazon. Do you have it available on like a website for Bitcoin purchase or
Yeah,
just on Amazon?
yeah.
Okay.
Don't go to Amazon, kids.
Yeah.
Let's move across to bitcoinbook.shop. So this is a pleb initiative.
Oh, nice.
Nico and the team over there. It comes under the Consensus Network umbrella, KONSCENSUS. But go to bitcoinbook.shop, use the code BITTEN, and you'll get a 10% discount on my book, all of the books. It's available there in English and Spanish, but Jeff's books are on there, Knut's books are on there, like that. Safe's books are on there. So you can get some real good gifts for people as well. And use that Bitten code, you'll get 10% discount. And then if you pay
Cool.
with Bitcoin via the Lightning Network, you get another 10%. Like, this is really cheap. So you're going to get them cheaper than Amazon, and you're going to support a pleb initiative.
So what we're all about here is paying with Bitcoin. So fantastic. Well, I want to shift gears quickly and then just talk a little bit about, the podcast and your Bitcoin education journey in the last stretch here. So what motivated you to launch a podcast in the Bitcoin space? And you've been consistently churning out episodes now for what, 3.5 years. So it's a pretty good.
January 2020, I started right at the end of Jan. So like Feb 1st.
Oh, almost 4 years now.
Yeah. Flown past, man. Why did I do that? Like many listening, I got to a point where it was just, I had to do something. I had to contribute. It sounds cliche, right? It sounds a little bit, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for here? Yeah, cliche, I guess. I had to give back. I had to give back to the community that taught me so much. But that is what we feel. That's most likely why you started yours. You just reach a certain point, like you. I was banging my head against the brick wall, trying to tell the people I love around me about Bitcoin. Like, this, guys, like, stop everything. I found something here that is like nothing else ever or will ever be again. And it's going to free us, and it's going to store our value. And we can get into an investable asset. One of the biggest sat drop moments for me. I can invest in something, in a financial asset before Wall Street even know about it. Like, and in fact, they didn't even design it. Like it's not theirs. Like, this is crazy to me, because when they come, they're going to come, and they're going to come freaking huge, which we're about to see next year, most likely. But it's taken them so long, and I was trying to explain this, and nobody would listen. So I figured, okay, do I write another book? That seemed like it was going to be a hell of a lot of work. And would it even sell? And could I start a podcast? And I ummed and ahed with that idea for months, until finally I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's go. Let's just start a podcast. It's just recording. What's my barrier to entry? 0. I had a mic, had a laptop, had an internet connection, had Zoom. It was all done. So where were my excuses? So I made a few reaches, reached out to a few people, and yep, done. Press record. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And after 3 or 4 episodes, I was really enjoying the conversations, and people were listening, and I couldn't believe it. I actually could not believe it. I'm like, this is making a difference to people. So that was a motivation. And ever since then, call it an addiction. I don't know. I can't stop. It's like, can't stop, won't stop. Having the opportunity to speak to some of the people that I've got to speak to, and to then go and meet them and interact them at the conferences, and speak to some of the plebs that have followed us down the rabbit hole, and the difference it's made to their lives, and how it's changed their lives and their families' lives. So why would I stop doing the podcast? You never know who's going to listen. What one person is going to listen to that next episode and have everything aligned for them. I'm like, oh, wow. And how many more maxis are we forging by having these conversations? and this is what we need. We need more podcasts, more, thousands more. We need more books, thousands more. So anybody listening that's on the edge of giving back to the community, get out there, do it. We need you. Start a meetup, whatever it is. This ain't happening ever again. Like, the time is now. We've got to embrace it and go.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way. And then that's why I wrote my book 2 years ago. And then, wanted to get involved in local meetups. And then, eventually this year started the podcast. Even though we talk more about health stuff than Bitcoin, but I was like, I could convince all these health people to get interested in Bitcoin, and maybe some Bitcoiners to get more interested in deep health rabbit holes. Like, I agree with you completely. Everyone always says, oh, there's too many Bitcoin podcasts, but it's like, that's bullshit, because there's actually not even that many. Do you know how many other podcasts are? Do you know how many just like general finance podcasts or general health podcasts there are? There's so many. And guess what? There's going to be so many people. Maybe they don't want to listen to Breed Love. Maybe they don't want to listen to, Peter. They want to listen to you because they resonate better with you. They just like your personality. They like your style. Maybe they, just like the dynamic of and align with everything you've done on the personal perspective. So I think it's spot on. And from a personal side of things, like, there's so many benefits. Like you said, we get to talk to these incredible people. I mean, even you and I, it's like we already know each other now on an individual level a little bit more, and there's a high chance probably our paths cross at some point in maybe a Bitcoin conference or something. And then it's like, wow, you have that connection that's pre-made. And then when you do meet in person, it's really strong. And to me, it's like, if you have a podcast and you get kind of a really influential person on the line, that's kind of the only way you're going to be able to talk to them. How else would you get an hour and a half, 2 hours of their time? Because that insight, from a learning perspective, the amount that I've learned from interviewing, some of these experts. And then it's like, hey, if someone asks you, oh yeah, just go listen to this podcast I did with so-and-so, go listen to this, or you can send them a series. And I think it's a great way to think about it. You're kind of almost building your network of resources to educate people, and then it does the work for you. But I think you're spot on. There's so many good reasons, and I think especially early on, and then you can look back maybe in 10 years and be like, wow, look at all these people. And I know you've talked to like Michael Saylor and folks like that's incredible, right? Like, in 10 years, it'll be even more incredible.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy, man. The next 10 years, it's already, just looking back the last 4 years, as we close out this year. And I think fondly back to that first year of starting the podcast in 2020. A lot of shit went down, the whole COVID stuff, and how the maxis just like held the line on everything. They held the line on the narrative of all of the bullshit. Like, so on point with so much. And I learned so much from the people that were coming on the podcast as well. Not just about Bitcoin, but like you said, health, this, that, and the other thing. It's just huge. I mean, I've had vets on the show, musicians on the show, like actors, football players. It's so vast, the scope of this thing, and the individuals and personalities that are coming into it, and they're all bringing their own thing, their own unique individual thing, and that is what makes an interesting and dynamic civilization. And it's all coming in like the big burning bright orange campfire of Bitcoin. Are all sitting around it, discussing ideas, big ideas, and how do we move this thing forward, and what needs building, what tools do we need, how do we solve that problem? And it's incredible to think that it's happening so quickly, far quicker than anybody could have ever imagined, and it's only just going to gather speed. This thing does not stop, as much as they're going to try and put the brakes on it, which is going on in the US and in the EU right now. They're trying to bring in these regulations that are going to stop people being able to buy a USB stick and hold some information on it, because they're going to call it an unhosted wallet or some shit. Like, it's just ridiculous. So I don't know.
It's fun times ahead, right? It's crazy, right? We don't really know what's gonna happen, but I don't know. I'm excited. I think it's like what an exciting time to be alive, and yeah, we can just try and bring as many people with us as well. And it's something you've done pretty well. I don't know, just from being on Twitter, I know a lot of people have mentioned that they've kind of got on the Bitcoin train or become way more convicted by listening to your podcast and what you have to say. How have you maybe altered how you try and bring people on the Bitcoin train or approach orange pilling someone? Especially, I feel like with your background, it's very valuable. But now that especially you've talked to a lot of these very influential, educated Bitcoiners as well. So how has that changed? Maybe if you're orange pilling someone today versus 3 years ago.
Yeah. 3 years ago was the crazy dude, right? Like, no, and this, and didn't you know, blah, blah, blah. And you just can't stop yourself. So it's a lot more measured now. And listening is classic sales training, really. Listen for the pain points. The best salesmen are the ones that say the least because you just listen. And then when you're listening, you're like, all right, okay, there's a pain point there. You can come back to it, not same conversation, even in 2 weeks. But you know where the pain point is. And that could be the rising prices or whatever else. And then when that comes up again, you're like, oh, yeah, I've been doing some reading on this and like inflation and stuff and da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. And did you know? There's just a little touch point. Then another little touch point. So I'm happily, I used to be
it's
right.
more nudging.
This person.
It's more nudges instead of full on assault.
Touch points instead of full on pilling. An orange pilling is going to take goodness knows how many touch points. Doesn't matter. Everybody's different. But trying to get it all downloaded, Matrix style, in one sitting, not happening. Don't even try.
Yeah. We think that's the most efficient way to do it, and we think if we have a good enough relationship with someone that they will listen to us, but that's anything but the case. And I realized that with my own parents, so it's taken years and years, and you have so many close friends, and they're just like they almost get tired of it. So eventually I think it's important that people don't get full on assaulted, because they need to kind of come to this conclusion on their own. Because if they don't, or at least somewhat, like if they just blindly lead, oh, Daniel, I like Daniel, I'm just going to buy Bitcoin because Daniel has Bitcoin, then they're not really understanding what Bitcoin is and what it has to offer and why it's an opt out of the system. So it's almost like by design. And that's a good thing, because if you are listening to this and you're on the edge, you're unsure, you're still early. There's so many people who are not really understanding the value that Bitcoin brings. But as we know, the next couple of years, it's just going to continue to pour in. So whatever nudges you need to give to people, it can be helpful, but everyone really needs to find it on their own, I think.
So on the health thing, let's not skip that. I want to hear your thoughts on some health stuff, and because I was pulled down the Bitcoin the niacin rabbit hole.
I saw that in your bio. I was gonna ask.
Yeah. That was an episode I did with a pleb who reached out to me just out of the blue. He's like, "Yo, he wanted some advice because 4 kids, wanted to like take his job remote, was sick of the COVID bullshit, wanted to go live in the Philippines and blah, blah, blah. So a lot in common. So we got to chatting. And then he's like, have you ever heard of niacin? I'm like, no, like, what's that? And then he white pilled me in about a 2-hour conversation. I said, dude, you've got to come on the pod and talk about this. And so he thought about it. He's like, yeah, all right, fuck it, I will. So he come on and we did this incredible interview. And that led to another character, Dr. Dimitri Katz, that came on and did a 4-hour interview about niacin and his findings. And then that led me to all kinds of different people reaching out like this is crazy, like can it be, and blah blah blah. So I set up a signal group, and there's almost like 100 maxis in there now. They're all Bitcoiners, and we're all throwing shit around and like testing out niacin and following different protocols and sharing our results, and it's just been crazy. But I'd love to know your own journey into that rabbit hole, if you've been there, if you haven't, what you found.
In niacin specifically, or like health in general?
Niacin or health, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, well, I could talk for 5 hours, and then maybe we'll need to have a conversation on your show. But really, it's
Sounds good.
niacin. Yeah, I mean, niacin's a B vitamin, B3, right? And it's really important precursor as well to things like NAD, which is imperative for carrying electrons in our mitochondria, which is like the fundamental energy powerhouse of our cells. And we talk a lot about that on this show. We get really in depth on this show, which is fun. And I have an electrical engineering background, so I never thought that would be pertinent to health optimization. But actually, it turns out that our bodies, our health, our biology is really electromagnetic by design. So I've gone kind of lesser so down this supplement rabbit hole. I used to take way more supplements than I do. And really, I'm just big on addressing the environment, the food you eat, the light you get, the more you're connected to nature, really, the better you're going to feel. And this has been suppressed by, the centralized healthcare and pharmaceutical systems for so long, because it's free and it's accessible to everybody. And it costs $0 to get in the sun more and get connected to the earth via grounding and eating real food. Obviously, a lot of Bitcoiners are kind of pretty aware of the seed oil carnivore movement, but my mission is to, educate them and push them to even go deeper and start to understand. Sunlight's kind of crept up. It's been, Stephen Lubka and folks like that have been doing a great job, but there's even more there. And it's like, we've just been designed to live connected to nature, and only in the past 150 years of 1 to 5 million years of evolution for humans have we severed that. So, and it makes total sense. And it's when you look through a Bitcoin lens as well, you realize that everything that's set up today, even our technology, right? It's very toxic. EMFs are toxic. And it's not to say we don't have to go back to the caves, we can't use technology. It's just if we design them a little bit differently. But that won't happen in a fiat world. That'll only happen under a Bitcoin standard. And then something I'm actively working on, I just launched my website, Decentralized Health, will be to help fund research that is not getting funded. So anything, it could be something like niacin, it could be something like just sunlight, water, all these sort of esoteric health concepts that have zero ROI. They don't get funded by the NIH, by the centralized system. So we need to start raising money for them. And that's what I'm going to help and try to do. And I think as well, Bitcoin plays a big piece of that. So yeah, main mission really is connecting the health and Bitcoiner folks and bringing this momentum forward. But I think, niacin for sure can be powerful, especially if you want to have a good time. I know people will do that and then go in the sauna. I've done that a couple times for like a
I've not done the sauna yet.
I warn you, it's very intense. You could take like niacin or activated charcoal and then go in the sauna, and that'll flush out a lot of toxins. But it's such a rabbit hole. It's so important, and I'm glad Bitcoiners are becoming very open to the health optimization piece, because these are the two most important things, right? Your health and your wealth, and they've been corrupted tremendously by fiat money.
Definitely got to come on the show to do a rip on all of that kind of stuff, man. Yeah, for sure, because I love it, and I know the listeners love it too. And I noticed you had your blue blockers on. I've not gone that far yet. I try and keep my blue blocker
the screen tint
setting on the screen.
That's good.
Yeah.
I'm happy to talk about light, like all of that. It's really fascinating.
I heard Jack Cruz talking about that.
You need to get him on the show. I just talked to him. That's definitely what he preaches a lot of the in-depth quantum biology to kind of, put together the pieces if you do want to dive deep. But it's all about being connected to nature and the fact that light is the main input signal to our biology. And yeah, I'm now a big subscriber to that theory. We actually have we recorded a podcast with him 2 weeks ago, and it's coming out next Tuesday, and it's gonna be a massive one. And yeah, I talked to Marty Bent last week. I was like, you need to talk to Jack. Like, he hasn't been on a lot of Bitcoin podcasts, and he's a massive Bitcoiner. He's literally in El Salvador working directly with Bukele to build like a decentralized healthcare system. So happy to connect you as well. I think
I've got him in DMs. I keep saying come on the show, and then
you got
he
it.
disappears again.
Yeah.
So,
I'll connect the emails for you.
Okay, good. Yeah, please do, because I'd love to have him on. I heard him on.
It might be good. It might be good
podcast.
for me to come on as the preview for him. But it depends what you want to talk about. I mean, he could get really in depth. But if he's talking to a Bitcoiner audience, he might just talk about Bitcoin and decentralized healthcare, kind of how he did with RFK on the Rick Rubin podcast. So yeah, it'd be fun. It'd be good. It's all like-minded individuals. So let's keep this momentum going.
All right, man. Well, we'll get it set up. We'll rip in the new year, and we'll do the whole deep dive on the health stuff. I'm looking forward to it.
I love it. Daniel, thanks so much for coming on. I think sharing your story, especially on the homeschooling, world schooling, and travel, is just it's invaluable, because there's not a lot of people doing it. And then you did it via kind of this Bitcoin sovereign lens. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing all that. I know it's really helpful for me, but where can people find more about you, social media, Twitter, and then your podcast?
Yeah, sure. The podcast is Once Bitten. Download Fountain app if you haven't already. Go and listen to my pod. Go and listen to Tristan's pod. Use Fountain app. Get away from the other apps. I mean, like, we're Bitcoiners. We need to do value for value, and it's a good way to get noobs in as well. Tell them, just download Fountain app. You're going to earn some little satoshis. What's a satoshi? Whatever. It's like we said, touch points. But get used to Fountain app. Download it. They've got a big upgrade coming. I was speaking to Oscar just last week, so that's nice. That's cool. And you can listen to the Once Bitten podcast there. Then, yeah, head over to Twitter, Princey SOV, Store of Value. That's where I generally hang and mix it up with the plebs and post the latest episodes and my thoughts on certain things and whatever. So that's probably the best place to interact.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Daniel, for coming on, and yeah, excited to chat more in the new year. Thanks, everybody.
Cool, man.
We'll see you next time.